Over the past month and a half, we have been building what I claim to be one of the best European engine platforms that there ever was. Yes, it is a Volkswagen engine, but no, it is not the one that they got into a lot of trouble with. I'm talking about the 20-valve 1.8 turbo engine from the early 2000s. Before they started going all wacko with direct injection and plastic this and plastic that and sticking a gosh darn water pump underneath the intake manifold. So far, we've gotten most of the parts for final assembly all cleaned up, and in this episode, I hope to get everything ready to go for build day. So kick back, grab yourself a bag of sweet chili heat Doritos, because I have another banger for y'all today. So over the last couple of days, I've gone through and I've re-sandblasted all the important pieces to get this motor sealed up. Remember, this is the finish that we're going for with all of these raw aluminum parts, because as you can see, even after sandblasting, a lot of these pieces are very, very pitted and disgusting looking still. So we're gonna go ahead and shoot them with a couple coats of the faux aluminum paint and then some nice acrylic clear coat to seal the deal. And that should keep these pieces looking factory fresh for the foreseeable future. Let's go ahead and lay down some paint. All right, guys, I wanna show you a really quick tip on an easy way to mask things like this to make sure that you get a perfect masking job pretty much every time. And that basically entails just using a hammer. As you can see, I've got my tape laid down where I want it, and all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit around this edge right here with a hammer, and that's gonna break that masking tape exactly where that edge is. So all we gotta do is come here, peel this back, being careful obviously, like that. Same on this side. And boom, just like that, you've got a perfect leading edge and a perfect masking job. We're gonna do the same thing with this piece right here, and that just prevents us from obviously painting the sealing surface. Now I know what you're thinking, why don't you just go ahead and replace the seals? Well, A, this one comes as an assembly, so if I wanted to replace this seal, I'd have to buy this whole rear main seal. And two, remember, this is a budget build. We're not gonna spend money replacing that seal, replacing this seal. This is just a mock-up engine, and as long as it looks good at the end of the day, I'm not super worried about it. Not to mention that this seal is gonna be covered up completely by the nice looking flywheel and clutch kits we're gonna be offering, and this seal is gonna be behind the timing cover anyways, so that's gonna be my justification anyways. So then, let's get to work. After we go ahead and mask up this rear main seal, we have to get a little bit creative, figuring out the best way to hang all these parts as to not block any areas that need to be painted. What I normally like to do is thread a bolt into the piece and then just use a couple of zip ties and then hang it from these metal sawhorses that I have for doing body work. Once all the parts are hung up, we got to go over them one more time with some grease and wax remover just to get any of the final contamination off of the surfaces that we're going to be painting. In this case, I used compressed air to blow off the excess and make sure that that grease and wax remover flashes off before we go ahead and lay down our paint. Alright, so while our parts are preheating, I just want to remind you, again, we're going to be using, not a sponsor, the Duplicolor engine enamel. This has ceramic coating in it, and I've had really good luck with this stuff. And of course, it's the faux aluminum finish but they do make this stuff in other colors, specifically low medium and high gloss black. This is the high gloss black and is what we use on the engine block. If you didn't see that episode and want to see how that turned out, or how this turned out rather, I'll leave a link in the description down below for the playlist to this full build series. And after a preheat, we can lay down our 2 lighter coats and then our 1 final medium to heavy coat. And look at how awesome these pieces turned out. Let's go through and figure out the final piece of the puzzle before final assembly, and that is hardware. So I went through my bucket of hardware when we tore this engine down, and I picked out the hardware that is not only going to seal this engine up, but it's also going to be visible from the outside of the engine. So it needs to look presentable. And that includes the valve cover hardware, the oil pan hardware, the rear main seal hardware, and then the front crank seal retainer. So let's go through this hardware and figure out what is good as it is, what needs to be cleaned up and refinished, and what needs to be replaced altogether. Now, don't mind the fact that some of these bags are covered in oil. I made the mistake of putting the bolts that were oily on the inside of the engine, such as like the main caps, rod caps, oil squirter bolts, etc., in the same container as the bolts that weren't. So some of those bags kind of leaked out onto all the other bags and got these oil contaminated as well. But that's the reason these are covered in oil. So a couple of these actually look like they're going to be good as is. But one thing that I know isn't going to be good as is the valve cover stuff. So we just removed this in the last episode. And the studs themselves are kind of okay. As you can see, these came from the factory with kind of like a zinc coating. I forget what they call it, like a zinc flake coating almost. And that unfortunately isn't something that I can do in-house because it's a pretty complicated process, as well as I'm pretty lazy. Even if I wanted to do a regular zinc coating on all of these, it's very time consuming, and we want to get this motor put together ASAP. So I think what the plan is the studs we're going to clean up. As for the nuts, as you can see, even the nice nuts are absolutely covered in crap, and some of them are pretty dang crusty, like this one you can see here. So I think we're going to order some new nuts and throw these ones in our bolts bin. So let's make a refinish pile and a scrap pile. It's not actually scrap because I'm obviously just going to keep these for other things that don't need to look all nice, because these are always nice to have around in stock. Like I said, refinish these. Let's go ahead and look at our rear main seal hardware. As you can see, the majority of them are in pretty dang good shape. So I think these are going to be a nice clean, but good as is. So rear main, let's remember that. Next up is our oil pan hardware. And from the looks of it, kind of same story. Most of these are looking okay. There's a couple of them that are getting a little crusty. As you can see there's a little bit of rust starting there. So we'll see if after we clean this up, if most of these guys are savable as they are. And you can see a lot of them are covered in kind of grime and oil, which makes sense. You saw how much this engine was leaking oil pretty much everywhere, and that's going to get on the end of these bolts. But I think these are also going to be savable and don't need to be replaced and don't even really need to be refinished, but we'll come to that conclusion after we clean them all up and see what they look like. And last but not least, we got our front crank seal retainer. And that's this hardware here. So these are much like the oil pan bolts, except as you can see, these ones are pretty gross. So at the very least, these guys are going to need to be wire wheeled and refinished, so they can go in that pile. So now that we have a plan, I'm gonna go ahead and get some of these ordered up, and let's start getting after it. Man, I feel like I'm in a TV show or a movie or something, because it seems like any mechanic scene where it's not about cars or being a mechanic or anything like that, this is the only tool that the mechanic's using. So anyway, some time and a bench grinder later, we've got some cleaned up studs, as you can see. So we're gonna keep these in the bag until we're ready to use them. And then, like I said, once everything's together, we're gonna acrylic clear coat the entire engine, and that's gonna seal these guys up and make sure that they don't rust in the future. So after some long and hard deliberation, and by that I mean no real deliberation at all, I decided we were going to clean up and refinish all of the heads on all the short bolts. So that includes the rear main seal bolts as well as the front crank seal retainer bolts. Say that 10 times fast. And then I decided that the oil pan bolts, because they're not as visible when the engine is on an engine stand, and there's a couple spots where we can stick the worst of the bunch, where they're basically going to be completely hidden, so we're just going to leave those bolts as is. All right, so now that we have all of those bolts, or at least the heads, the part that we want to paint, all cleaned up, I'm going to show you guys another trick tip on how I like to paint stuff like this, where you're really only worried about the head of the bolt, like I said. And all it requires is a little bit of cardboard. Can you see where we're going here? So it's super simple. You just take your cardboard, you take whatever hardware you want to paint, and you shove it through the cardboard like so, and then as you can see, it sits at a perfect spot where you can just blast around and fully paint the head of that bolt, and then you don't have to worry about gravity making it drip on one side or making it look all ugly. So let's go ahead and fill this board up with all the bolts that we want to paint and lay down some paint. And now, finally, for the last piece of the puzzle, the cylinder head. So let's, once again, shoot this with some grease and wax remover, get it all blown off and dried and flashed, and lay down some more faux aluminum, baby. Well, guys, once again, it is about 1 degree Celsius here in the shop today. So the paint that we just laid down is probably going to take at least 24 to 48 hours to fully cure. But after it does, we can finally go ahead and dedicate a day and build this engine back up, get it finally sealed up, and I am super stoked to see what the final product turns out to be. I know it's been a long journey through this build series, and I appreciate you guys sticking around even through all the super tedious work like sandblasting, cleaning up hardware, etc. Fortunately, all of that hard work is going to go a long way, because once this thing is fully back together, the amount of effort that we put into prepping everything is going to show through in how it turned out, I promise. However, that is going to have to wait until the next episode. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is a good time to do so you don't miss any future episodes of this build series or any that we do in the future. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace!